Thank you, Jesus. Father, I just thank you for this day. I thank you so much for God, this being able to come before your people and to share all of the great things that you have done on my behalf. Father, I thank you, Lord, that you said in your word that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So, Father, I thank you that this testimony will be encouragement for your people, God, that you can change anyone, and that when you're praying for your children and believing God to save your children, Lord, that it will happen and it can happen in your timing and in your way. So, God, I thank you for this time to come before your people today. And I pray, God, that they will be blessed and you will be glorified. I give you all the glory and the honor, Holy Spirit. I thank you and I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Hello. God bless. Happy Saturday. Um, my name is Yolanda Samuels coming before you. And if any of you have been following this ministry page for any amount of time, you know that I usually I've started this page doing some teaching, and I usually have a lot of guests on here to share their testimony. And the Lord has told, he basically was telling me that it's time for me to share mine. Because I can usually, I'm a background person. For those who don't know me, I do not like the spotlight. I do not like the forefront, never did. I'm a background type person. I can do 20 things in the back and nobody ever know it's me. That's the kind of person that I am, that I prefer to be in that place. And so he was just telling me that it's time for me to share some things about me that many of you may not know. Some of you have been following this page for a long time, and so you've heard a lot of things about me. And if you read any of my books, you've also learned some things about me as well. So there's some particular things that I'm going to share. I can't tell everything, of course, because it would take forever. But I do want to share some things of what God has done for me and who He is in my life and who He has been to me. And nobody can ever take that away from me. It's one thing to know God that your mama know, your daddy know, but when you know Him for yourself, it's a totally different life that you live. And I'm grateful to Him. So let's get started. Let's get started. Okay, I am a middle child. And the middle child is very special. We are anointed, in case y'all didn't know. We have a very special place within the family structure because we're right dab in the middle. I have an older sister that I was raised in. I'm talking about the siblings in the house first. I was raised with an older sister and a younger brother. And then I have another older sister and another younger brother. And my two older sisters are close in age. And then my two younger brothers are close in age. And I'm in the middle by myself. So my parents call me baby girl. That's just what they call me, the baby or baby girl or whatever, because I'm the last girl. And of course, my brother is the baby overall because he's the youngest. My sister and I are 3 years apart. My brother and I are about 14 years apart. And so he came as a pleasant surprise. When my mom was close to 40, didn't think she was going to have any more children. He came along, and I'm glad he did. Because he came along, he was the only one to give my mother grandchildren. My sister and I never had children. So he was the one that gave my mother grandchildren, made her grandma. So thank you, bruh. So I grew up in South Carolina, a town called Hampton. Many of you, if you've been following any of the news, if you've been under a rock, I'm sorry. But if you've been following the news and may have heard about some things that happened in Hampton, South Carolina, that's been all over the country, that is the town that I'm from. And I was born and raised there. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. So he preached most of his life, probably about maybe 40, probably close to 50 something years. He was a pastor, started off as a deacon, and then the Lord called him, I think, around in his 50s, and then that's when he went into ministry from there and pastored some churches or whatnot. And so my mother and my mom's family, they all were raised in church, and I was raised the exact same way. So we grew up in Bethlehem Baptist Church in Hampton, South Carolina. We grew up there, and we learned to serve early. We had Mama gave us two choices: you gonna usher or you gonna sing on the choir. Which one you gonna do? So we chose to sing, and so we were singing since our papa was around 5 or 6. We was in the youth choir. We were singing, and we did that until I graduated. Until we moved on from that church and went to another church. But we served there the whole time we were there. We weren't just going there and chilling. We actually were taught to serve. And so we served in the on the choir, whatnot. And my mother and them, they were taught the same way because we all sung on the same choir. All of us, uncles, cousins, all of us were busy in the church. It wasn't no sitting back laughing and playing. We were busy in God's house, and we were taught that early on. Later on, in life, for my young adolescent years, I had a great childhood. I can't lie. My parents both had great jobs. They really took great care of us. I can't even lie about that. We lived a middle class life. They both worked at this plant in town called at the time Westinghouse, but they ended up changing the name to Nevermar some years later. And so everybody who was everybody, mom and daddy worked at Westinghouse. I'm telling you, it was a big plant. Everybody worked there, and my parents both worked there. They worked there until the place shut down. So they worked there. I think both of them worked there probably almost 40 something years. And when I tell you they were faithful to what they did, they were faithful in everything they did. They really were, church and outside of church. They were very faithful. They didn't, call in and play sick. They wouldn't, couldn't find them when it was time to go to work. They were constant and they were loyal and they were faithful. And this is how we were taught to be the same way because we watched what they did. So we were very faithful and loyal and in things that we did and going to work on time, being on time, and different things like that, taking what you do seriously. And so that's what we were taught. And as time went on, going up into probably around the teenage years of when things started to kind of shift for us, there was a person that kind of came that was coming to the house, along with the parents, and she did something to me, and it changed my life. It caused a spirit of perversion. God bless you, Dr. Rhonda. It caused a spirit of perversion and lust to enter my life. I knew nothing about that stuff, but it really changed some things for me. And then I really began to have struggles in my flesh concerning certain things. And so even around that time was when my parents, their marriage was even more rocky, and it was starting to kind of things to start to change. So by the time my brother came along, he was born in I think around 89 or 87, somewhere up in there. So by the time he came, things were starting to change in their relationship. So we kind of saw a lot of things. We heard a lot of things, and we saw a lot of things. And then it was just a sad thing because one thing about my father that we didn't find out till later on, some things that he struggled with were generational. We would keep it real. Some things in the bloodline, but then there was other things that he struggled with was because he was a Vietnam veteran. My dad, I think it was back then when they were getting drafted, he went to Vietnam, and he was the firstborn of 6 children that my grandma had. And my grandma, she had some children, some babies die before she had him, so he was the first baby that she had that lived. And so him and my grandma were very, very close. And of course, there was time to get drafted. He had to go to the war, and so he went off to Vietnam, and he did the machine guns. He had his tank. He still got pictures of that stuff. When I was home a couple of months ago, we were sitting. My husband and I was sitting in the living room. We were just looking at his pictures and going through all of the things. And I can only imagine what it would be like to know you have to take somebody's life and protect this country. There's a lot that you deal with. And he told me some stories, and I was like, I don't know if I could have done that. So there were a lot of things that he was dealing with internally he didn't know about. He didn't understand where it was coming from. And so it played a part in our upbringing, and it played a part in the marriage. And it wasn't the best and easiest atmosphere to live in because there was a lot of anger. We didn't know, we never knew, how the atmosphere was going to be from day to day. And so, those things played a role into why he was the way he was. We were just terrified of him. I'm gonna be honest. We were scared of him. We didn't play no games when it came to him. Though we still, my sister and I did our dirt. Y'all do the teenage thing. You lie. You say you're going to a friend's house and you're going to a boy's house. We done all that stuff. And they were we looked at our parents as being kind of strict on us because we didn't get to, how people can go hang out with people's houses, spend the night and all this stuff. Oh, no, no, no. There was maybe one person. I've been to one slumber party, and it was one person that mama would let me spend the night with because her mama and my grandma were best friends, so they knew him. I mean, she wasn't wild like that, so I can. She lived out there in the country, so I could go and stay with her. But they didn't play us going to people's houses and doing all kind of stuff. And even when it came to going to basketball games or football games, my dad was like the judge and jury. Standing before him was like, oh my gosh, it was taking forever to say yeah or whatever, because he knew, because he had friends that would tattle and tell that we weren't going where we said we were going. We just loved boys, and we were slick, and we did our thing, we did. And so a lot of times we didn't get to go certain places, or if we did, somebody would always come back and tell him or this and that did we were doing this and doing that. So we would get busted either way it go. But guess what? It didn't stop us from trying. We still kept doing it. We would get in trouble. And but then even as things were happening in the house and things were going on, um, like I said, things started just getting worse. It started getting worse, and I was very angry. We weren't, we grew up in a time where you didn't get an opinion. You didn't get to tell how you felt. If your parents told you something or something was going, you didn't get well, how you feel about it? Oh, no, 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 no. You're gonna do what I tell you to do, or this is what it's gonna be. And instead of me learning how to balance what I was feeling, everything would be anger. I would be angry about everything. And I would be mean. I was mean and I was angry because I didn't have a healthy um see a healthy I didn't know how to express myself outside of anger. So if I was disappointed, I was angry. If I was sad, I was angry. Everything came out anger. And so because of my anger, my mom used to light me up a lot. And y'all know what I mean? She used to light me up a lot. I think I got lit up more than all my siblings. She used to light me up because of that. Because sometimes we don't know why a child is the way they are. When we feel that we can get it out of them another way. And don't get me wrong, everybody got their opinion on that, and I know some do and some don't. But this was the era I was raised in, the 70s and 80s and 90s. Y'all know how it went down. They ain't play no games. So she used to. That's how I used to get disciplined. But what I really needed was counseling. I really needed a way to really express myself outside of what I knew. But as I said, it was a generational thing. Okay, it was a generational thing as well. And so going forward in life, Brown, when we left home, my sister went to college, and I decided when I was in high school, I think I did a year or two of NJROTC. That's the Navy Junior, whatever it's called, but it's NJROTC. And you basically, in high school, you dress like you're in the military, and they teach you military ways. They teach you discipline, teach you different things like that. So I ended up being a part of that. Um, I had no desire to join the military at the time. It was just something for me to do. So I was a part of that. I was in that, and I really enjoyed it. And then when it came to close time for me to graduate, to get out of school, I really didn't know what I was going to do. My sister, as I said, she went to college and she didn't, do what she was supposed to do in college. So my dad was like, well, if you want to go to college, I'm not paying for it. And I was like, I ain't got no job. So how am I going to do that? And my grades wasn't to the point to where I would get scholarships because I didn't, I didn't really apply myself as I could have in school. So I was like, okay, God, I got to figure something out. I don't know if I want to just work and stay here. I'm like, I got to figure something out. So I ended up, after I got out of high school, of course, I ended up signing up for the Navy, and I joined the military. And it was one of the best things I could have ever done. I look back on it, and I thank God that I did. Because I ended up being the first female in the family to join the military. I had an uncle, and I had another male cousin that joined early on when we were still young, but I was the first female to join in the family. And so, right when I left home was when things with my parents really began to, their marriage began to really fade. So I think it was in 97, I believe, 90. It might have been 95, something way up in there. I remember I called home one time. I was dating this guy in Alabama that was dogging me out. He had a baby in our relationship. He was just doing me all kind of way. And I was sitting there putting up with it, tolerating it and everything because I guess maybe in my mind, I thought that's what I deserved. So, and I remember his mom told me, she said, you know what? She said, you are a wonderful young lady. And she was like, you deserve way better than what my son is giving you. And she said, I know one day you're going to find somebody that's going to treat you right. And when you do, she said, I want to meet them. I want to meet them. And I was like, really? She said, yeah. And she was so cool. I loved her so much because she was one of those cool moms that you can talk to. And she didn't take up for her son. She didn't take up for him because that was her baby. And, she knew he was doing me wrong. And she told me I deserved more than that. And I remember one time I called home and I was talking to mom, and she told me, she said, well, you know, I had to move on. You mean your dad aren't together anymore? Y'all, I was so shocked. I was hurt, but then again, I was like, I understand she had to do what she had to do. And because, like I said, growing up in an environment like that, you saw a lot of things, you dealt with a lot of verbal things, a lot of, you saw a lot, and it was hurtful, and she was hurt a lot. And and not saying my dad wasn't hurt, he had his own hurt as well. And it's just that, it just wasn't right. And so, at one point I didn't understand that, she was supposed to get out of the marriage. And at one point I didn't understand why we were still being subject to the atmosphere we were in. And one day she picked me up from school and told me, she said, well, I'm getting ready, we're gonna go somewhere, we're gonna leave and this and that. And we were so excited, like, yes. And then I remember when she picked me up from school, she told me, well, I changed my mind. Y'all, I was so angry. Oh, I was so angry. I just didn't say a word. I just sat there and I just stewed in it because I wasn't going to talk to my mom all kind of way like some of these kids do today. They talk to their parents all kind of way. Oh, no, no, no. I said I wasn't going to do that. I'm just going to hold it. And so holding things in became my life. I said, because I can't say anything because I don't want to be disrespectful and I didn't know how it was going to come out. So I held it inside. I said, I'm just going to hold it and I'm going to stew it. I'm going to let it stew in me. And that's what ended up making things the way it was with me. And so, but later on, she did end up doing that because it was beginning to impact my brother. He was young and it was beginning to impact him and she was not going to deal with it anymore. She said, I can't. And so she ended up, they ended up being separated, and then they did get a divorce, and they were married for about 25 years, and they ended up getting a divorce. And when I talked to her that day, and she told me she was moving on, it did something to me. I said, you know what? I don't have to sit here and put up with this dude. He been dogging me out. I've been taking care of this dude. I said, he been dogging me out. He been cheating on me, and I'm up here playing around. So I was like, when I left Alabama, because he was in Alabama, Lynette, Alabama, he lived down there. When I left and rode that Greyhound back, I was in the military at the time. When I wrote it back, I said, I'm done. And I was done with him then. And so that was that's when I learned that I didn't have to put up with the things that I did. So moving on, of course, I joined the military it was September. Oh gosh, help me, Lord. September 1994. I think it was the 25th of 1994. I joined the military. I was 19 years old. I joined the military, and as I said, it was the best thing I could have ever done. I did boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. They at the time this was the first. We were the first female company, the females they had going to Illinois, I believe, because I was supposed to originally go to Orlando, but they ended up closing Orlando down, so they sent us to Great Lakes, Illinois, and I went there, did boot camp. Boot camp was amazing. It was a lot. It was a mind altering thing because one thing about being in the military is they change your mindset. That's right, Dr. Rhonda. Talking back. Come on, let me put this up here. Talking back and get you knocked out. You better know it. See, y'all kids do what y'all want to do today. I don't know where y'all get that from, but to this day, I'm 48 years old. I would never disrespect my parents to this day. I don't play that. No. So I ended up joining, as I say, good morning, husband. I'm sorry. I ended up joining, the military. Then I went to Great Lakes, and then after that, I ended up getting a rating job as a photographer's mate. And a photographer's mate is you basically took pictures. Back then, we had to roll the film on these little silver spools. I mean, it was old school, and had to put it in the solution and all that. Y'all, I was horrible at that job. Oh my gosh, I was horrible. I was like, you know what, this ain't working for me. And so at the time they had other rates they said that were under, I think it was undermanned. In other words, they had other jobs in the military that needed more people. So I ended up hearing about, at the time it was called Radio Man. Radio man, basically you dealt with communications. So I ended up applying for that and got selected to go there. So I ended up going to San Diego, California to go to A school. They call it A school. At the boot camp in the Navy, we call school after that A school. So I went to A school, had a ball, just enjoyed myself. And then from there, I got stationed. We got to pick orders, and I got stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. So, and then, as I said, as time went on in the military, I felt that growing up in the house I did, my parents were really strict. I felt that they were, and a lot of things we couldn't do. My mama didn't play. You didn't play secular music in our house. They used to call them blues. Mama said, "You don't play no blues up in here. You don't play the blues in our house. You don't be hanging out. We had a curfew of midnight all the way until we left home. You better be in that door by midnight. We only had 15 minutes to talk on the phone, and y'all know we found a way because we wait. They go to sleep and got on the phone, and that's when they had the two-way. And every time that two-way beat, you better answer that. You better answer that beat because it could be somebody from mom and daddy. And if it is, you getting off the phone. So it was just, a lot of things. I'm like, man, I said, when I get out of this house, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I did. And so when I went to, A school and met a lot of people, saw all these guys and stuff like that. And I was just in heaven. I did a lot of things. I was in heaven. I said, ooh, spirits with alcohol and all this and that. I said, I drink and do what I want to do. And I did. From about 19 to about 24, I did everything I wanted to do. I did that. I was wild. I got caught up, fornicating, sleeping with people, all kind of stuff I did because I was young and I wanted to get stuff out of my system, so to speak. I knew about God. I knew about the things of God. My mom would talk to us all the time about salvation and things like that. We tried it in high school. It was hard. So I gave up. I said, well, it's too hard. So I'm just going to go out here and do me. And that's what I did. And then got caught up in a situation where I was a mistress with somebody's husband. I got caught up in that. And it was the very thing that I judged my father about. So the very thing I judged him about was the very trap I fell in. And so, it was a hard thing to get out of. And it was only a short amount of time, but it was hard. A soul tie don't play no games. It was hard to get out of that. But thank God I did. And so moving on from there, I ended up, I did around, basically, I'm kind of fast forwarding it. I did 14 years in the military. I got out in February of 2009, February 3rd, 2009. I got out of the military. I could have stayed in. I could have retired at the age of 39. However, God had a higher calling for me. And it didn't make sense to people around me why I would give up my career because when I tell you I did a lot of deployments, I know in one station where I was stationed at for 3 years, I did 9 deployments. And I would be the only female that would go out with all the guys that would be deployed with the guys. I've been all over the place, Afghanistan, Jordan, I've been to Rome. I've been to Italy. I've been to Rhodes, Greece. I've been to Africa. I've been all over the world, and it was an experience like no other. I had a ball. It was the best thing I could have ever done in my life because I've been a lot of places, done a lot of deployments, probably maybe over about altogether maybe around 12, 13 deployments I've done. And all that time I had a lot of awards. I was up for E7. And everybody was like, I knew you gonna get it and this and that. But y'all, it just wasn't my heart. And I just couldn't understand. I'm like, Lord, I could be set for the rest of my life. I could be set. But I just wasn't feeling it. Okay, we were in Norfolk. Oh, okay, cool, Dr. Rhonda. That's cool. Yeah, that's the biggest Navy base in the world. So everybody goes to Norfolk. And then, I ended up, like I said, I got out at the time and because I knew God had something more for me. People thought I was stupid. They told me I was stupid for getting out, told me you don't know what you gonna do, you don't have no plan. I said, well, I trust the Lord to take care of me. I said, but there's more to this than what I'm seeing. So I still had the same job, but it ended up merging. The RMs merged with IT. So we were doing communications, internet, secure internet, unsecure internet. We were doing had a lot of crypto. You had to have a top secret STI clearance. Your background had to be crystal clear. You had to be trustworthy. So I had that clearance and doing a lot of things. So it was a lot of experiences that I had. It was a lot of great things that happened when I was in. And I just knew it was time to move on. So I get out. I was married, my first husband at the time. I got married in 2001. And we were married then for a couple of years. I went to Afghanistan when 9/11 happened. We left the next day. And that was an experience all by itself. So it was just a lot of things that happened in my life. And as I said, I was ready to move on and find out who I was. Once I got out the military, I had to detox. When you're dealing with anybody in the military, you have to shed the identity that Uncle Sam gave you, and you have to find out who you really are. Because for 14 years, Uncle Sam told me who I was. So I didn't know what was in me. I didn't know what my future was supposed to look like. I didn't know what my career was going to be. I didn't know what my passion was. I knew what he told me. And when I got out, I tried to stay in that lane, and ended up, before I got out, I went to school and got a bachelor of science degree in business administration with a concentration in IT. I got my first bachelor's degree then, and because that was what I knew, so I figured I would go in that lane. Got a job working for Lockheed Martin, made great money. It was an easy job, but it was boring. I'm going to work every day, not doing nothing, and I'm getting paid. I'm like, this ain't gonna work. And so ended up moving. My ex-husband and I ended up moving down to Georgia. We go down to Georgia, and then that's when everything began to change. So when we went down to Georgia, around 2011, somewhere up in there, I ended up. I remember growing up how the family trusted me with their children. They would trust me to babysit. They always called on me for the children, and whenever I joined different ministries or whatever, I would mainly be drawn to intercession, but also I had a love for kids as well. So I was like, okay, Lord, was praying about it. I said, I think I want to, I think early childhood education is the way I need to go. So that year I ended up enrolling in college to get I got my bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree in early childhood education. I started working in daycare. So I worked in daycare for 5 years, with the infants all the way up to preschool. I worked in different classrooms, did it all. And whenever, even as I worked in childcare, God would always promote me, because I didn't call out to work. I didn't miss work. I wasn't late. I would go to work about an hour or 2 hours early. Sometimes I would be to work at 4 a.m. I would wash clothes that need to be washed at the daycare. I would make sure I had my lesson plans for the week. I would decorate my classroom. I would do whatever. If anything needed to be done, I would get it done. And I didn't have to be to work till 6 a.m. So I would work from 6 to 2. That was just my nature. So I would always be faithful with what God gave me. Any job I had, I was faithful. They always could depend on me. They didn't have to worry about me calling out, playing games. When I came to work, I came to do what I was supposed to do. And I loved it. And so I did that for about 5 years, and ended up going all the way up to an assistant director. That was a disaster. Okay. That was a disaster. It didn't work out the way it could have, but I learned in all of it. And then ended up from there in around 2012, the end of 2012 or somewhere up in there. That was when my husband and I, we were going, I think we might have been at about 12 years of marriage, going on 13. And he told me he didn't want to be with me no more. So he wanted out the marriage, and he had other things going on, and I had to find my own way. And so I had to basically, get evicted. I had to get evicted from where we were because I couldn't afford it. I went to the people and told them, you need to evict me. I don't have the money to stay here because I'm a proper person. I'm not perfect, but I'm not going to sit here and shuck and jive and lie and do all that scheming and stuff. I said, I'm not doing that. So you can evict me because, I don't have the funds to take care of things, working in childcare and education. You don't make a lot of money. He made more money than me. I said, you just going to have to get me evicted. I said, I'm just coming to you and letting you know. I had a car that I got, and also the car. Thank you. Thanks, babe. I appreciate it. And also the car, I told them, you can come pick this up. I said, come get it. I had a Dodge Avenger. I said, please come get it. I said, I can pay you what I got. I said, but I can't afford it. So you can come pick this car up. I said, I'm not going to hide it. We had a double car garage. I said, I ain't putting it in there. I'm not going to be running from you. I said, please come get this car. And so they came and got the car. But the day they came and got the car was the day my dad bought me my grandma's car, because she had passed away, was a car that she had. And it was fully paid for. It was kind of an older car, but I didn't care. So God provided for me. And even in that, during the time I was living in Augusta, Georgia. And so at the time I had a cousin that lived there. And so I was able to stay with her for a couple of months. And I think I was fearful of moving forward. So she came to me one day and said, you got to get up out of here. I was like, what? She said, yeah, you need to move. I'm gonna give you a couple of weeks and you got to go. I said, oh, okay. So I ended up, God blessed me with a place, and I found a place and ended up going there. And then, it was really hard to let go of the marriage. It was so hard because we were together, like I said, for 12 years. I grew up thinking you get a divorce, you go into hell, you a Jezebel, you an adulterer, and different things like that from what I grew up hearing and what I learned, in the churches that I was a part of. And so I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want, to get in trouble with God. I don't want to be an adulterer. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I said, God, I want to be married. I just don't know what to do. And I was having dreams about us being together. I was having dreams about the marriage being restored. But guess what? It was all flesh. I thought it was God. It was me, because I didn't want to let it go. It came time for me to sign the divorce papers. I tell y'all, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. Hardest thing I ever had to do. I rolled them papers around with me. I rolled them things in the back seat for a while. And then I heard the Lord say, sign them. I was like, but sign them. I said, okay. Signed them and dropped them off at the lawyer's office. I said, okay, God. And I was on my own basically. And it was hard to make ends meet, not making money. It was hard. It was a struggle. But God always took care of me. And during that time, before I ended up getting my place, I was so in despair. But I thank God He connected me with Calvary Gateway International. I found that church. I would go around visit different churches. I found that church, and I remember when I went there. I remember Apostle B told me. She said, "If you say either God is going to restore it or He will give you somebody better." And I was like, "Oh wow!" And I mean, they didn't know me. They didn't know me from anybody. I was just going visiting, getting the word, and I really liked the people. And I was like, "Man, I like it here." But God connected me there for a reason. So even going through the divorce and everything, they really helped me get through it. They had people to talk to me, and everything. And it really, really helped me. But it was still hard, y'all. I was in my 30s, late 30s. And I'm like, God, I failed. I'm a failure. Nobody wants me. If I looked better, maybe He would have wanted me. Maybe this and that, because there was somebody else in the picture. And I made all these reasons as to why I got rejected. It was me. It was my fault. I could have done this. I could have done that. And I went into a cycle of self-condemnation. And I dealt with that most of my life. It's self-rejecting myself, being rejected because others have rejected me. I will reject myself. And so moving on, went through, signed the papers, went through it, didn't ask for spousal support. I could have, because he told me he would do that for me, but that wasn't true. I said, you know what? I'm just going to leave it alone. My flesh wanted to react, y'all. I was so mad. My flesh wanted to react. My flesh wanted to do things that I should not have done. But I said, okay, God, if I retaliate and do this stuff, if I become vindictive, I am opening up the door for the enemy to really wreak havoc in my life. I'm telling y'all, because I didn't have a car at the time. He had a car my sister gave us, but I didn't want to. Instead of I wasn't going to do that, take that from him. I said I'm not going to do this stuff because I'm like I got to allow God to avenge me, though it was hurtful, though he turned into a different person, and I know it wasn't him. It was the enemy. Trust me, I saw it in him. It wasn't him, and he ended up turning almost like my enemy. And God was really showing me like, okay, you have to live you can't just talk and say I'm holy, I'm this, I'm saved. I had to show the enemy that you're not gonna make a fool out of me. You're not gonna cause me to miss God. You're not gonna cause me to do stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing. You're not gonna do that. And so I ended up having to take the high road, and it was not fair. It wasn't easy, but I had to take the high road. And I'm glad I did. I'm telling y'all, I am so glad I did it the way I did, and God graced me to do it. It wasn't me; He graced me to do it. And yet I was raised. We didn't do all this fighting, and you didn't catch us doing that stuff. I never got in a fight in my life. I don't do all this fighting and cussing you out. I'm going to your mama house and I'm flat. No, 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 no. My parents didn't do that, and we didn't do that. So a lot of things, like I said, I would tolerate a lot of things, but I'm glad I did it the way I did because God was glorified in it. And I know He saw that I was a real woman of God. I wasn't just talking, and I wasn't perfect in the marriage, y'all. I had control issues. I was not perfect. I was not at all. And so I had my fault in it as well. And I can understand now why it dissolved the way it did. And but we were able to make amends some years later. We were able to talk, and he apologized to me. I apologized to him, and and we're cordial. We don't talk all the time, nothing like that, but we're cordial. And so we were able to move forward from that. During that time, after we got divorced, I was seeking counsel with a man. I talk about him all the time, named Apostle Dorsey. He has a marriage, family, singles counseling, and I share some of his posts in Becoming One Flesh with people because this man was a blessing, a major blessing to my life. That was my first time I ever went to counseling because for some reason we feel Jesus, and I'm not saying he can't fix everything. So hear what I'm saying, but a lot of things are psychological, and we need help outside of outside of church and different things like that. And it's not a sin to get help with these people. God gave them the gift to be able to help and counsel us. And he was the best thing. That was the wisest thing I could have ever done. My sister told me about him. To this day, I will sing this man's praises. I'm telling y'all, he blessed me and he helped me. He was standing with me at first, with my ex. He was standing with me because God was seeing all this stuff and thinking it was God. Y'all, it was all me. Because he had moved on. He didn't want the marriage. When I say he didn't want it, he was like, I'm done. It was nothing I could say. I could pray, fast, did all that stuff. We think we can fast and manipulate somebody's mind. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, sir. You can't do that. So he was determined. He said, you just should have never got married. And he was right. God warned me some years ago, gave me a dream. And exactly the way the dream happened was exactly how it happened. And I didn't listen. So I'm not blaming him. It was me and my hard head that I did what I wanted to do. And that wasn't God's perfect will for me. It was his permissive will. He allowed me to marry him. Though he told me to wait, I didn't. So I had to pay the price for that. Moving on, like I said, I talked to Apostle Dorsey and I told him, I said, I'm just trusting God for this. And he was like, you know what, but it's going to have to get to a place to where you're going to have to find out where he stands. And I was scared. I said, oh no, I don't want to know where he stands because he might not want what I want. And it was looking like things were going to change. But at the end of the day, God had a different plan. So he told me one day we were talking, he said, I hear the Lord saying that he has a man out there that's in ministry that really wants a wife. He's praying for a wife. He is tired of running around. He's not into that stuff. He has been saving himself because he is looking for a godly wife like you. I said, what? I was like, really? I said, so I can get married? We get married again. He was like, you can't sit here and tell me that when a marriage fails, God only has one person on the universe for somebody, and you get one shot, and if you fail, you done. He said, that is ridiculous. He said, that's ludicrous. No. I was like, oh my gosh. And that was the first time I knew that God had a plan for me because I wanted to be married again. Married, it hurt. It was a hurtful thing to go through, but I wanted to be married again. And so I made a vow to God. I said, God, I'm going to save myself. I'm not going to get with another man. I'm not getting in nobody's bed. I said, I'm not going to do that until I get married because I did that the first marriage. We fornicated up until the day it was time for us to get married. And fornication will cloud your judgment. I know y'all might not want to hear that. Fornication will cloud your judgment. Sex will cloud your judgment. And had I listened, I wouldn't have been in the mess I was in, but it was all for the glory of God. All for my good. Trust me, I learned from it. So anyway, moving forward, my sister, she was talking to me one day. She said, you know what, sis? She said, amen. That's right, Dr. Rhonda. We learn. We live and learn. We do. And so my sister, she called me one day. She said, you know what, sis? She said, you have been sitting here waiting. I waited for years, y'all. I'm not talking wait no 2 or 3 months. I waited for like 2 to 3 years for this man, thinking we were going to get that together. I waited, prayed, hope, prayed, had other people praying. It was a long wait. And she told me, she said, you know what, sis? You've been up here waiting for somebody that does not want you in that way. She was like, why are you still there? What? Well, this, that, God show me. She said, sis, you need to let that go. No, because she said, sis, you need to let that go and you need to move home. I said, going back home. I said, no, I ain't doing that. That don't make no sense. All my cousins, it was 3 of us that was up there together. They both moved back home before I did. I said, y'all going back home. Oh, he coming. Well, I was the last to go. I moved back home right along with them. And it was the best decision I could have made. I quit my job. I told them I was leaving. They did not want me to go. I said, I got to go because I was a preschool teacher. You so good, you the A. I understand all that, praise God, but I got to go. And I ended up leaving a week before I was supposed to leave because I got so excited because I knew God had something for me. Whatever I could fit my little car, that's what I took. I know they was mad at me. I left a furniture full, a house, an apartment full of furniture, and I mean good furniture. I left it. I said, I'm going back home to start over. I moved back home with my mom. My sister was there. She had just retired, so she moved back home, and we were there together. That was when my tutoring business was birthed that way. Excel and Learning Tutoring. I started that in 2017 and did a lot of, started with that. Didn't have a dime. I used what I had, advertised, put flyers up around town, ended up getting students. And I tutor to this day from 2017 to now. I'm still doing that because God had more for me. He was birthing things in me. And even from there, I've been a part of a lot of ministries. I served in a lot of ministries. I've always been drawn to prayer. Prayer was all I did. All I used to do was pray all the time. I would join ministries and I would be a part of the prayer team, intercessory, prayer, prayer, prayer. And I would always say, I'm an intercessor. That's just who I am. And I was fine with that. I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't. I was an intercessor. And so before I moved back home, I talked to, told my pastors I was leaving. She said, I already knew it was coming. She's like, you got to do what you got to do. So, they have give me the blessing. I moved back home. And as I said, it was the best thing I could have ever done because sometime after that, probably like a year after I moved back home, close to a year, probably not even that long, that's when I ended up meeting my husband now. And so God orchestrated everything. I went through a lot of counterfeits. I compromised. I went through a backsliding period where I did things I wasn't supposed to do and things like that. But God still had grace and mercy on me. And so, and I thank him for that. And so I ended up meeting Joseph and we met. People ask me, but how did y'all meet? Well, he messaged me on Facebook. So Facebook is not always the devil. He messaged me on Facebook. And at first I ignored it. And I was like, yeah, right. Because I just got out of a mess of a relationship. I said, no, I know he probably playing games. And so he messaged me and I didn't read it initially, or I read it and didn't respond. And then he ended up messaging me again. And then he saw my tutoring video. Now, see, this is how God works. Because I started the tutoring video, I would do videos. He saw my video on somebody's page that was friends with me. And that's how he saw me. And so he saw it. He looked at it the first time. He said, okay, that's what she's talking about. He said, he looked at it again. He said, man, she kind of fine. I was like, I know that's right. So then he ended up, I ended up responding to him. He gave his number, so he can call me. So I called him and we talked. And he asked me, and what I loved about Joseph that was so different, he came to me like a grown man. He didn't ask me what size my bra was. He didn't ask me to send him a body shot of what I looked like. He actually wanted to know about me and what my goals were, what my 5-year plan was, different things like that that men never asked me. And so he saw something in me. And that's how we became friends. And we talked all day, all the time. We talked on video because he lived about an hour and something from me. And we talked on video. We talked all the time and got to know each other. And then everything went from there. And I tell you one thing, God has a way of doing things in your life. He has a way of bringing you into the place where he will have for you. And many times we don't understand why we go through what we do, but every single thing I went through had a purpose and it had a plan. And even when I moved home, before I think around the time, that's when I started realizing I could write. Now, this was after we got married. I ran across Prophetess Kimberly Moses ministry. And then I began to follow her and listen to her. Before I moved home, I was listening to her probably back in 2016, 17, something like that. And she would have these prayer calls, and that's how I got connected in her ministry. She had a project of a book that she did, and called it Cost Me Everything. And you could write a chapter on something that God delivered you from. And I wrote about my experience with adultery. And that's how I started writing. I didn't know I could write. I always had journals. I have some journals right here, and there's only about 3 of them. I got journals all the way from 2004. I would write things, write what was going on in my life, write down different things, and not realizing that God was using that to show me that I had the ability to scribe, that I was a writer. And then that's when I started writing. I wrote my first chapter, my one chapter in that book, and it was reading like, man, you really know how to write. And so that was how I grew the confidence to write. So after we were done with the book, she said, well, y'all can go forward from here. You don't stop writing because you wrote this one chapter. Don't stop writing. She said, many of you are going to write books. You're going to do different things. She said, you could do a blog from this book. You can go forward from there. And when she said that, I said, you know what? I said, well, Lord, I'm going to pray about that. I said, Lord, and see if that's what you want me to do. So I started this page in 2019, I believe it was. Might be, yeah, I think it was 2019. I started this page. And my posts used to be so long because I would talk about different things. I think the first thing I ever wrote on this page was talking about mistakes and how we make mistakes and how we can cause those mistakes to define us. And we don't look at them as a learning thing, but they end up being something that holds us back. So I used to write these long posts. She said, you might want to shorten your posts up a little bit. I said, oh, okay. So then the Lord started dealing with me about teaching on this page. Now, let me go back a little bit. I had no idea I was a teacher of the Word of God. I told y'all, I'm a background person. To this day, I still am. I'm a background person. I would usher. I would be a part of prayer team. I would be in the nursery working with children. That was fine with me. But before I left CGI, Apostle B started pulling me forward, and I didn't understand it. I said, all these people in this church, why is she asking me to do the announcements? I'm the usher in the back. Why I got to come up here? But I was going to do it now, but I just didn't understand it. I said, I'm not that kind of person. But she was preparing me. Little did I know, she was preparing me for where I was going. So when I had ended up moving back home, the pastor of the church, she asked my sister and I if we could help her teach Bible study. I said to myself, I ain't never taught my dog Bible study before. I don't teach Bible study. I don't know how to teach. But I did it anyway. And that's the more I taught, the more confident I became in the Word of God. And I had a lot of word in me because I've been to some phenomenal ministries. I've been to some great ministries. Y'all, I've gotten some great word and I've gotten great training. I knew a lot. I'm not going to say I know everything, but I was well grounded in the word. And so it came a time to where all that I was learning had to come up out of me. And that kind of got my feet wet with teaching. And then when I started, doing the tutoring videos, I was scared out my mind when I was doing them, but I did them. And then that's when I started, writing and doing interviews with different people and things like that. That started pulling me out of my shell. And then I remember before I left, how did I know I was a prophetess? I'm gonna get there. I don't want to make this too long. I found out I was a prophetess when I was taking one of the prophetic classes. I took many classes, prophetic classes. Didn't know why I was drawn to the prophetic. Wasn't trying to be a prophet. Didn't ask to be a prophet. I just wanted to know everything I could know about God and know how to flow in the different gifts of the Spirit. And so I took a class, and I know one time he was having a leadership meeting, and Apostle, I think it was Apostle M said, he said, I know you're a prophetess, but right now he said, we don't have a lot of faithful people who can usher. He said, so that's why we have you ushering. And I was saying to myself, I'm a prophet. Y'all, I didn't think about no stuff like that. I was like, I'm a prophet. I was like, man, I don't know. I said, because prophets have this experience, they have encounters, they have this. And I started categorizing myself like, man, I don't know about that. I said, because I ain't never seen angels. I ain't never, and I started thinking, well, maybe I'm really not a prophet because I didn't have the experiences everybody else had. But every prophet is different. And so they said that, and I was like, okay, that's nice. I'm a prophet. Okay. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. But as I went to the next church, Pastor, she saw some things in me. And like I said, we was part of intercessory team. My mom, my sister, we are a family of prayer. We pray, we are intercessors, and that's what we do. And so God would begin to show me things. He would show me all kind of things. And he would deal with me in dreams all the time. When I got saved in I think it was 90, it was around 97, 98. I immediately started dreaming, y'all. And everything I dreamt came to pass. And I didn't understand it at the time. And I would dream about family members, different things happening, some having babies and all kind of stuff. And I was like, well, what is this? And I would dream it and tell them, they'd be like, yeah, right. And then the baby would come and they'd be like, wait a minute. And I was like, wait a minute, Lord, you showing me stuff whenever you show me things. I don't have a lot of dreams with a lot of symbols and trying to figure it out. My dreams are pretty direct. Whatever he showed me, that's what it is. And that's when I knew that there was something going on with me, but I didn't understand it. This was in the 90s. I didn't understand it. I just went with it. I said, it is what it is. But I knew when I would pray, I would see when I would pray. Things would become visible to me. I would see things, see certain things when I would pray. And I'm like, okay, I'm an intercessor. I'm a prophetic intercessor. That's how I saw it. So, as I said, as I continue to move on, took more classes, got with a Prophetess K, took, School of Prophets, learned more about it, and really began to kind of try to accept who I was. People would call me prophetess. It would make me uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't know about all that. And, I didn't like the title thing. But the more I began to walk in it and really allow God to move in me, the more comfortable I became with it. And then this was in I think it was 2020. My husband and I were officially ordained by Apostle Snooks, Michael Snooks, as I was ordained as a prophetess. He was ordained as apostle. So it ended up coming full circle. And so and I've been, growing in this gift ever since. And what I want to say to close this up, I want to say is that as parents, many times you see your child going in different direction. You see them doing stuff that you didn't raise them to do, and you can't understand what is it going to take for this child to do what needs to be done. I'm a testimony that God is hearing and He is moving on their hearts, and He will deal with them accordingly. He had to deal with me accordingly. I did everything I was big and bad enough to do. I don't have the time to tell y'all everything. I'll be on here all day. There's a lot more I can say, but I just want to say this, that parents, do not ever stop praying for your children. The word tells us that the effectual, fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. You have to know that your prayers are effective. Your child, when the time comes, they have to get to that place to where they surrender. I had to surrender. My mama couldn't make me do it. My sister had to surrender. God, my mama couldn't make her do it. We had to surrender on our own. We had to get to that place to where we were open and we were ready to say yes to God and invite Him into our hearts. And we had to take a lot of long, hard roads. We had to deal with a lot of near-death experiences. We had to deal with a lot of things. And your child may be going through the same thing. They may be going the hard, long road. But guess what? At the end of the day, it's their choice as to whether they want God or not. We can't make them choose Him. They have to see the need for Him in their lives. And so I just want to say to you all, don't give up. Don't ever give up on your child. Don't ever stop praying for them. Don't ever think God is not hearing you. And don't ever think your child is not being dealt with because you don't see it. You don't feel it. They out here acting worse than, okay, they getting it out their system. They doing what they doing their thing. I done it. I did my thing. But when it came to that time, when God it led me to that altar that day, when I had plans to go home and finish drinking my beer in my barracks room when I was stationed in Tampa, Florida, that day when I had decided I was going to drink that afternoon, God saved me that day. That was the day I got saved. I didn't plan it. I didn't sit here and say, okay, well, I'm a since I'm 25. No, I wasn't trying to surrender at the time. But when He called me, when that lady grabbed my hand, didn't know me, just visited that church for the first time. When she grabbed my hand, I knew it was time. And that day changed my life forever. So you may not understand why your children, or your child may be going the direction they're going in. But I'm telling you, they have to surrender. You can't make them. You want them to, but you can't make them. My mama couldn't make me and my sister surrender. She kept praying and she kept believing God that we were going to get our lives right. And thank God we did. But it took a lot for us to get there. And this may take your child and your children a lot to get there. But do not give up on them. And don't think that they're a lost cause, because those can be the very ones that God can turn around at a moment that you may not even be aware of. You don't know what God is doing on the inside of them. You don't know how your prayers are affecting them. So continue to pray for your children and believe God to turn them around. I'm a witness He can do it. I'm a witness that He can change them. I'm a witness He can deliver them. I used to drink all the time. I used to drink and drive. I did a lot of things that God could have allowed me to lose my life over, but He spared my life for a reason. And so I want to encourage you guys, continue to pray, stand in the gap for your children, allow God to work out the process in them. So there's a lot more I can say, but as I said, I'm not going to be on here. I'm not getting ready to get off of here, but I just kind of want to share some of my life with you all. And if you want to know more about me, I have books out there. And the first book that I wrote that shared a lot of my journey was Count the Cost. Let me see if I can find it on here. So if you want to know about me, you can definitely read in those books, because I share a lot about a lot of mistakes I made, So this was my first book I did. Was Count the Cost. Is it worth it? And Prophetess K forward did the forward in that book, and this basically shared a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that I've done. And you know, I made a lot of mistakes I have, but I tell you, they were so valuable and they worked out godly character in my life. And that's why I can be a help to other people and help them to get through certain situations, is because I've been there. And I know that when we don't allow God to heal our soul wounds, they will continue to show up in our lives. And we have to let God heal us from childhood trauma, from different things we may have went through. God wants to heal us totally. He wants us to be made whole. You know, we get caught up on the deliverance part, where you can be delivered and not whole, because you can say, oh, but that don't bother me no more. And in 10 years, something come up and you right back like, wait a minute, I thought I was over that. It's like, hey, it's layers to this thing. It's like with forgiveness. I had to get to the place of where I was forgiving, because I hated my father. I was angry at him because how he did us, how he did my mom, what kind of childhood we had, you know, and you know, and I was angry for a long time. And you know, and I thought at one point, even though it was back in 2012, you know, it's probably back in 2000, early 2000s, that I talked to him and forgave him, but it still was a process. Forgiveness is a process. It's not going to be oh, I forgive you today, and that's it. A lot of times it's not like that. Sometimes it's in layers. You have to forgive, and it's a process to forgiveness. And I realized that it was a process that God was still working in my life, and it's a process He's still working in my life, and I thank Him for it. And so I just want you all to continue to be encouraged. I pray some of what I said have encouraged you. As I said, it's so much more I can say, but I'm gonna get on off of here because I've been on here about an hour. But as the Lord leads, I may share more things as He leads me to. And I just wanted to let you all know from a child's perspective, because I've never been a mother, but I am a child, and I can let you know that you never stop your prayers. You never stop your prayers, and your unconditional love, your prayers, your patience. I'm telling you, it will pay off in the end. And even if they decide not to, it's not on you. It's not your fault. It's not anything you've done. We all got a mind. We all got free will. And we have to get to that place of where we want God. And if your child may not want God, and you keep saying, well, what is wrong with them? Why do they want to get it together? We all had a road. We all had a road to take. And for some of us, it's longer. It's a longer, harder road than others. Some of us may get it right away, and some of us don't. So, you know, so it's like that when, especially when God really has something on your life, you tend to run the hardest. Because I can witness that. I did that. I ran the hardest. I did the most because I was doing what I wanted to do. But when that time came for me to surrender, I was more than willing to do it, because I done everything that needed to be done. There wasn't nothing else out in the world for me. And that's when I was able to give my life over to the Lord. And so I just pray that this bless you guys. Please stay tuned to later on this month. I'm going to have my first male guest on here as well, and he's going to share his journey in life. And I think it's going to be a blessing to you all. And I love you all so much. And I pray that you will continue to allow the Lord to lead and guide you, and that you will continue in the faith. So God bless you. I love you all, and I will see you all next time. See you later. And thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you all for coming on. Thank you, Dr. Rhonda. Thank you, husband. And for all of you who are going to watch the replay, thank you, Debbie, who's on Clubhouse. God bless you. And I will see you all next time. Bye.